Hello everyone, this is Ethiopian News Agency on regional and continental issues of economy. And our guest today is Mr. Salim Farani, Djibouti Sovereign Fund CEO. Okay, thank you, Mr. Farani. Can you tell us about yourself and Djibouti Sovereign Fund?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you in your studios and a pleasure to be in Ethiopia. My first visit to Ethiopia, and I've been to about 60 countries in my 34-year career in my life in general, and I've invested in about 100 countries, so it was about time to visit Ethiopia, and there are good reasons for that. Now, I think in terms of introducing the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Djibouti, it's part of really the initiative of the President, His Excellency, the President of Djibouti, Mr. Ismail Omar Guelleh. Quite a visionary, quite a leader, and leadership is very important. It makes all the difference in an institution, particularly in a country. It's all about management and the leadership of the country. So among many things that President Guelleh has done over the last 2 decades, for example, the GDP of Djibouti has gone up 7 times. Now that doesn't happen every day. I don't know many economies that have gone up 7 times in size in about barely 20 years or so. So among other things, he set up Vision 2035. And Vision 2035 is obviously to provide for a better future for the people of Djibouti. And how do you execute a vision? So that's also the next step. You can set goals and vision, and that's how he decided to launch the Djibouti Sovereign Wealth Fund. Now, clearly, he's very well informed. He's looked around in terms of various sovereign wealth funds. There are roughly 50 countries in the world. Out of roughly 200 countries, there are only about 50 that have a sovereign wealth fund. So Djibouti is one of them today. Ethiopia is also now a country with a sovereign wealth fund with the EIH, Ethiopian Investment Holdings. So that's how the Sovereign Wealth Fund happened. Was launched about 2 years ago, but His Excellency, the President of Djibouti. And then different objectives for this Sovereign Wealth Fund. One is to contribute to the execution and the realization of the Vision 2035. And within that, it's diversifying the economy of Djibouti. So a key role for us is to diversify the economy of Djibouti, because today the economy of Djibouti relies heavily on the shipping business. I mean, you all are aware, especially Ethiopia, doing over 90% or so of its trade via Djiboutian ports. So build on the existing strength that we have in terms of port infrastructure and sea kind of infrastructure, but then do other things like tourism, like data centers, like renewable energy, etc., etc. I mean, the sky is the limit in terms of what we should be doing. Now, how do you manage a sovereign wealth fund if you don't have financial markets in your country? You don't have a stock market, there's no bond market, there's no investment sector per se. And again, the president of Djibouti decided to bring in the expertise rather than wait 10, 15 years until it's developed. It takes time, to start a new kind of business. It's a startup that was launched 2 years ago. So he basically got me in the end. The high-level authorities brought me on board as CEO of the Djibouti Sovereign Wealth Fund to manage, lead this fund and make sure that we achieve the objectives of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which, as I said, especially diversifying the economy of Djibouti. Now, I also brought on board a chief investment officer from London. I was in London, and this gentleman also brings in a lot of experience. I've got 34 years of experience, relevant experience in the investment world, in the international finance world. And between myself and our chief investment officer, we bring in about 50 years of experience. So yes, it's a 2-year-old kind of startup, but it's got at least 50 years experience, because we also have a team now, a team only of Djiboutians. So part of our role also is to train, coach, and make sure that we have the next talent of Djiboutians for what is still a new skill set, new talent. And so again, it's not for lack of things to do. So Djibouti Sovereign Wealth Fund, Vision 2035, And my background, as I said, relevant background, I was born and grew up in Tunisia, an African country, so I think it's important to mention that. And then I moved from Tunisia about 35 years ago. I spent about 10 years in Washington, D.C., in the academic world, where I have an MBA and a PhD in finance and investments. And I was the youngest professor of finance and investments and international finance in its business school there. And then I moved to London. After 10 years, I moved to the real world of the finance world. London, you know, Wall Street is in New York. London is the city. So the city is where all the financial institutions are. So I moved in there in the investment banking world, sell side, as they call it. And then I moved to the investment world, which is the buy side, to use technical jargon. And that's basically my career, including being a chief investment officer and chief executive officer and chairman of financial institutions in London. Then, between 2017 and 2020, I was a double minister of industry and SMEs. And then I've merged into it the Ministry of Energy, Mining and Renewable Energy. So that was obviously a key economic ministry. So all my career is really private, international finance, and those 3 years were very important because, I mean, in this role as CEO of FSD, it's under the oversight of the President and the President's office. And then on the board of Sovereign Wealth Fund of Djibouti, you've got the Finance Minister, the Budget Minister, Central Bank Governor. So it's important also to know how to interact with these high-level government officials. And those 3 years as Minister, I think, have turned out to be very valuable. Yes, the technical side of things is important in terms of knowing how to invest and how to manage investment funds, how to manage and lead the team and build the team and help it move forward, but also interacting with all types of government officials in Djibouti and outside of Djibouti. I mean, the idea also for the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Djibouti is also to reflect the best image possible. You know, we live in a world where image is everything and perception is everything. So we play a role also as a Sovereign Wealth Fund. We go to forums, it's a Sovereign Wealth Fund forum or road shows in terms of meeting investors here and there, because we need to also bring in partners. So part of our role as investors is to bring in partners as us, the strategic partner in Djibouti, and then bring in an international partner, if it's in infrastructure, if it's in tourism, so that we don't reinvent the wheel. So the idea is someone can count on us on the ground with a local information advantage, with a local know-how, but also with the global expertise. And then they come in and it's much easier for them rather than where do you start? If you go to any country, where do you start, you know? Who do you partner up with? So this is a bit, I think, the big picture. And as I said, I'm so passionate about it and I love it so much in terms of what I'm doing. And it's also marking history. I mean, this is a multi-generational fund. So it's a fund that will make a huge impact on the future of the future generations, just like they've done it in Singapore, they've done it in Gulf countries, they've done it in Norway. As I said, there are 50 countries that have sovereign wealth funds, and all these sovereign wealth funds ultimately made a positive impact and made a difference on the lives and the future of the current and future generations, actually. I mean, because from our point of view, there are short, medium, and long-term goals. So the short and medium term are important. But of course, if you're in it for you're an investment fund, sovereign wealth fund, or in general investment fund, you're in it for the long term.
Okay, as you have explained, Mr. Ferrani, Ethiopia has already opened up its economy in various sectors, say in logistics, telecom, and banking sector. How do you think this will have an impact with regard to strengthening and elevating the bilateral and economic relations between Ethiopia and Djibouti?
So I'll link it up a bit to the first comment I made. I mean, our leader, our president, the president of Djibouti, Mr. Ismail Omar Gelle, is really one of the people who pushes very hard for economic integration, especially regional economic integration, meaning Eastern Africa, but also so intra-regional, but also intra-continental within Africa. Because as Africans, all of us, 54 countries, we need to make sure that we roll up our sleeves ourselves as Africans, and we work for Africa, by Africans, to make Africa a better place for Africans in the future. Now, that means also that all the friends of Djibouti and Africa are welcome, because joint efforts and collective efforts and teamwork is the best thing. One person can only do so much. One country can only do so much. But if we get together, joining forces, then the impact is much bigger. So the economic integration that the president has been pushing for has two sides. There's trade integration, and there's the investment side. You can do economic integration via more trade, and there's a lot of it going on already between Ethiopia and Djibouti. But then the investment integration between the two countries, but the region also. I think we need to also think of the broader region. But it's good to start with two, with very, very strong links. And the truth is, I mean, everyone knows this is a strategic partnership. I mean, Djibouti and Ethiopia, Ethiopia and Djibouti, this is a strategic partnership historically and forever in the future. This is the way it is. There are so many things that link the two countries, whether it's in terms of the people. I mean, there are families that are born here and there, etc. So the languages, the culture, but also the links by road, by rail, the railway, by air with Ethiopian Airlines and hopefully Air Djibouti also. So the relationship is there. It's a strong, solid strategic relationship which has done a lot. If we compare to where things were 20 to 30 years ago, there's no comparison. Today, I think, I mean, trade between Djibouti and Ethiopia, not many countries have it. I mean, if you look at Northern Africa, trade from Northern African countries is 3/4 with Europe. It's not with Africa. So 3/4 of the trade of North African countries. But all of Africa now needs actually to follow on the footsteps of Djibouti and Ethiopia. And this is where we can do a lot more clearly, I think. Look, they've done it before. We should not reinvent the wheel. I mean, North America, Canada, US, Mexico, they've done the North American Free Trade Agreement, and you can see it's win-win-win for everyone. The EU, I mean, you can see, started with 10 countries or so, 12, 15, 20 plus, and it's win-win. Everyone has benefited from this joining forces and economic integration, whether it's not just Germany or France, but everyone else. Eastern Europe benefits from it. So here, same kind of thing. I mean, we've seen other countries have done it, developed countries especially have done it. Well, it's time for the developing countries to actually do even better. We need to aim high and be more ambitious in order to achieve our goals. The cross-border investments are win-win, and this is part of why I'm here also. It's to really talk to various people here in Ethiopia. Obviously, the Ethiopian Sovereign Wealth Fund, that's an obvious partner. It's a no-brainer in terms of building a strategic relationship between the Ethiopian Sovereign Wealth Fund, EIH, Ethiopian Investment Holding, and Djibouti Sovereign Wealth Fund, but other economic actors. There are so many stakeholders. This is a big country. Ethiopia is a big country. It's a big economy, and I've had really a great schedule in terms of quality of meetings, very diversified, and now it's building. Therefore, the objective of my trip, and this is, as I said, the first trip from Djibouti to Eastern Africa. Of course, it has to be Ethiopia first trip. I mean, I'm sure I'll go to Kenya and other countries in Eastern Africa and the rest of Africa. The idea is to build on our strengths. The stakeholders, there are so many. We can't do everything with everyone, but you build it. Relationships are built over time, and this is exactly what this trip is all about. It's about building relationships with the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Ethiopia, as well as different economic stakeholders. And then it'll be vice versa. I'm sure there'll be a visit. We're only one hour away by flight, which is amazing. We're only one flight 1 hour away. So there's no excuse of how long it takes to get between Djibouti and Ethiopia, or Ethiopia to Djibouti. And it's win-win in the sense that sometimes you may do a project and someone benefits a bit more than the other, but it's better to benefit both sides. And then there's good karma to think about, really. And economics and economic stability is crucial. Two things: social stability and political stability. They go hand in hand. Economic stability, political stability, and social stability go hand in hand. If and when you reach, we all aim for that. This is our ultimate objective: is to have an inclusive and sustainable prosperity, and that's the solution to all the problems. So when we have sustainable and inclusive prosperity, then you get the economic stability, and then that takes care of the social stability. Everyone is happy. The citizens have a better living, better standard of living. The children, the future generations are feeling good about themselves, and therefore then you get the political stability. So this is why I think we are driven by economics. Okay, we're not a political oriented vehicle per se, because it's all about investing the portfolio of the country, aiming for returns on investment, but aiming for making an impact, social, on the on the environment also, but also on the population, as I said. Well, I mean, it should be easier for Ethiopia and Djibouti to cooperate than with someone who doesn't know much about either country. So we have a competitive advantage on both sides to interact and discuss. But it's all about the dialogue and the discussions, because things don't come on silver plate. You know, you have to roll up your sleeves and work hard to make it happen. So I go back, the sky is the limit in terms of what both countries can do. What both countries can do, the wealth creation we can achieve, and 1 + 1 is more than 2. So one country plus one is more than 2 effectively. Djibouti is an open country also, it's a hub to many things. So, and we are complementary. So this is also the good thing, is that we're not obvious competitors, which is great. If we were both doing the same exact things, it won't be as easy. That happens sometimes. Neighboring countries, they kind of offer the same exports or the same kind of sectors where they have a competitive advantage. Not really in this case, including the scale. I mean, Djibouti is a 1 million population, $3-something billion economy. Yes, small is beautiful, yes. But then Ethiopia is 122 million people, growing by 3 million people a year, demographic growth, and GDP of over 100 billion. So size matters. And this is why the combination, both ways, hand in hand. So yes, I'm here to listen also. I mean, this is why I'm here also, is to listen, to take info and to get informed. Because by Zoom, out of Djibouti, it's not the same exact thing. So that's why I encourage everyone also to do, thank God, COVID is over, kind of, and therefore we can go on the ground and visit, and this is why, I mean, I must say, in terms of impression, maybe I'll take over in terms of anything you may have in mind to ask me, but first impression and the first perception are the most important with a person or with anyone, with the country. And it's been really, really positive, great from the moment I arrived. Very, very busy couple of days, hectic, because there's so much. I mean, I could easily spend a week, but I can't spend a week because I have a lot of other things to do. So I have to juggle between the time constraints and what I'd like to get out of the trip. So I always apply the 80-20 rule, with 20% of the resources, time, for example, or financial resources. If we achieve 80%, great, Perfection is not that easy to achieve. So yes, with 20% of the time that I would like to have in Ethiopia, I think I've achieved at least 80% of what I've had in mind from this trip. And then it'll be more, whether from my side or from my team, and vice versa from people. I mean, likewise, I think a lot of people did not know much about the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Djibouti. Yes, they know Djibouti is right next door, but the Sovereign Wealth Fund, because it's only been 2 years or so, the communication, yes, we're doing our best to communicate at the national and international level. So I greatly appreciate the opportunity you're giving us today to showcase and help more people, particularly our brothers and sisters in Ethiopia, to understand that there is a sovereign wealth fund in Djibouti. Yes, there is one here also, the EIH, and therefore we have a crucial role. We can be the game changer. Sovereign wealth funds have been game changers elsewhere in many other countries. Why won't we? I mean, so it's not for lack of will or ambition. So we are working on being the game changer. The sky is the limit, as I said, especially when we join forces. I've met really high quality, world-class type of people and stakeholders. And if you don't move forward, you go backwards. So we have no choice as the two countries, and as Africa as a continent of 1.4 billion people. We have to outpace and move forward faster than the rest of the world. It's a relative game, If we move at 4% GDP and some other regions in the world move at 6, 7, well, it's just a matter of time before the gap keeps widening. So no, the gap is there. We are still a developing continent. And there are many developed countries and developed regions like North America, Asian countries, Europe. So we need to join that group of developed countries, and therefore we need to work harder. So the mindset also is important. So this is also, I think, a crucial thing. We need to have hard-working mindset. We need all of us to understand that you have to sacrifice working hard because things should not come just quickly in the short term. This is where Asian countries have been a real success story, whether it's Singapore or South Korea and others. And those generations in the 70s and 80s have worked so hard. They've sacrificed to have now, some of the best and most developed countries on earth. So we need to learn from that. Once again, it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's really to see who's done what. And in our case, we look, I've talked about size. Djibouti is 30 times the size of Singapore. Singapore today, with these sovereign wealth funds, they manage about $1 trillion, a couple of sovereign wealth funds, and for an economy of about 400 billion. So the sovereign wealth fund is 2.5 times. The sovereign wealth fund has 2.5 times the economy. So yes, and others have done it. Qatar, many other Norway. So it's just a matter of time now. So we need also patience. Some people want to see everything happening now. Can't have everything happen. Yes, we are fast-tracking things, and there are very low-hanging fruits. There are some quick wins we're working on in Djibouti and outside of Djibouti. So I'll go back. The mandate of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, as set up by His Excellency, Mr. President of Djibouti, Mr. Ismail Omar Gille, is that up to 60% of the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Djibouti could be invested outside of Djibouti, with 20% of that has got to be with Ethiopia one way or another. So I think there's no stronger message in terms of the strong belief in the brotherly relationship, and it's spelled in the law of Sovereign Wealth Fund of Djibouti, March of 2020. It's spelled right there. I'm not making it up. So at the top level, the president said, look, yes, we want to be the multi-generous fund. We want to do like the others. Let's give priority to Djibouti. Of course, that's always the case. And then let's go into the regional integration and therefore Ethiopia, etc. And why you don't want to have all your sovereign wealth fund assets in your own country? Because you don't know how the cycles work. All the sovereign wealth funds for the whole world who succeeded, they've invested in their own country, but more than half of their assets and their portfolio are invested internationally to diversify the risk. So this is the basics of what I taught and what I've learned in the business schools and the finance and investment world.
How do you see the recently signed agreement in South Africa will have an impetus for the economic cooperation between Ethiopia and Djibouti, as well as attracting foreign direct investment to Ethiopia?
Well, that's a very good point, and congratulations to everyone in Ethiopia, everyone who has helped to make this peace happen with the African Union, etc., etc. So all the stakeholders, and I know that Djibouti has helped a role too. It's in our interest to have our brothers and sisters really live in peace and stability. So that's a great moment, and I'm delighted I'm here. I arrived when the peace treaty kind of was announced, so that's important. Plus, actually, this past week there was also the joint economic cooperation also session between Ethiopia and Djibouti. So things have been going on, as I said, for a long time. Now we are one stakeholder. So again, we can't be everything, but we are one stakeholder, and we're exploring sector-wise. The things where we can benefit that we don't have, for example, back in Djibouti, the industrial type of sector. There's not much of an industry, manufacturing industry. There is here, and that's an obvious area. But it could be in other areas, to be honest. I've seen some really impressive real estate developments, world class. That's an area, because in our own portfolio, as I said, it has to be multi-asset classes. It has to be equity, especially private equity. It has to be fixed income. It has to be real estate. So that's an area that we will be developing. And clearly, there's some impressive know-how out of here in that sector. You talked about telecom, etc. Yes, there is actually already some cooperation between Djibouti Telecom, which is part of our portfolio, 100% of it. I'm the chairman of Djibouti Telecom also, as it is 100% owned by the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Djibouti. There is already there's a cooperation agreement, and it's growing. So yes, we can do more with the telco sector here. And trade, in the end, I think both will benefit from having these two countries as a hub for the rest of Africa, for that sake, in terms of sea to air and railway and road. There's a lot of infrastructure that can be further developed. I think the tourism sector has also potential for growth from our side, and I've seen some world-class hotels here. Who knows, maybe some operators from here could be interested, or we would be interested in also hooking up with linking up with some of the best of breed, as I put it that way. And it's win-win. So investing is about taking risk and about making a return. It's not a charity. So in terms of risk, yes, the peace treaty reduces the risk. Now, for us in Djibouti, we perceive the risk premium of Ethiopia always lower than anyone else because, we feel far more comfortable, no matter, irrespective of, good, bad times. But today, certainly the risk premium has reduced for everyone. So we believe the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we're going to see back Ethiopia on track in terms of economic growth because that's what's lacked in the last 4 or 5 years between the COVID crisis and then unfortunately the instability at the social level. So with that behind us, yes, the world is not an easy place today with the war in Ukraine and Russia and inflation going through the roof, interest rates globally going through the roof. It's not ideal, but we have to be realistic and pragmatic and just keep moving forward. I mean, we're all in it together. And look, this is my first trip, so I'll have a better answer for you next time when I come back and I spend a bit more time than just a couple of days and meet other stakeholders from different sectors, as well as with my colleagues in the investment team, because the investment team is the driver of any sovereign wealth fund. So we'll do some analysis, some research, interactions, and then we'll start kind of having priorities, because we're not gonna. I mean, it's a sovereign wealth fund. It's not trading in the stock market. It's not like tomorrow we're going to invest, $10 million in Wall Street or no. We take things. This is really the resources of the country, resources of the future generations. So we have to really, handle them with a lot of care by taking some measured risk and making some decent returns, and everyone benefits from it in Djibouti and outside of Djibouti. And first, I think Ethiopia, as I just said more than once now. Now, I must say, the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Djibouti has been done really in a very smart and wise way. I mean, it wasn't just, within 2 months, no. I mean, the president and his close team worked and took a few years to get it up and running properly. And yes, there's no oil and gas. So a lot of people said, how are you going to do? Because everyone thinks sovereign wealth funds are the Gulf countries. Gulf countries is only half a dozen countries, but that's a big world. So Singapore, when they started with Temasek, the first sovereign wealth fund, another one is GIC, they've started with Singtel, Singapore Telecom. We've done the same. So we got the inspiration. We've looked at what has been done before, and we don't have diamonds, we don't have gold, we don't have all those natural resources. So the national champions that are actually, highly profitable, 100% of Djibouti Telecom, like Singtel for Temasek in Singapore, and 40% of a major holding company called Great Horn Investment Holdings, which has all the ports businesses, it has Air Djibouti, it has all the logistics, the free zones. So we have now 40% of that. So I'm the chairman of Djibouti Telecom and 40% of that holding. Now that gives us a strong, solid asset base to start with on our balance sheet, which is valued at roughly $1 billion, but not on market value, because today these are kind of historic values. If we go and use multiples of stock markets, etc., then these numbers. So about $1 billion is literally a third of the size of Djibouti GDP, and then we have also built a pipeline of nearly worth $1 billion of potential investments we're working on, multi-sectors. So this is also part of what we have to do. And the pipeline will grow now. With my visit to Ethiopia, there will be probably some projects that we will add to this. So that's another now, literally a third of the GDP of Djibouti that we're working on to make happen within the next 3 to 4 years. Now the next 12 months, yes, there will be some tangible results by the end of 2023. Because I've been around only since last year for about a year or so, and the first year you have to build the foundations and do a lot of other things. But from 2023, you and everyone will start seeing tangible results. But within 3 to 4 years, I think then we can see the tangible positive impact of the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Djibouti. And then over 5, 10, 15 years, by 2035. I strongly believe that Djibouti will be a very different place. And as I said, it's grown 7-fold in 20 years. Today, it didn't have the Sovereign Wealth Fund, didn't have very many other things, but today it has a lot of things really going forward. And it's got Ethiopia, which is in a different and stronger position today than 20, 25 years ago. The Ethiopian economy was not. It's much stronger today, irrespective of the crisis and everything else. It's a bigger population. Foreign direct investment, FDI, is crucial to the economic development. All the countries that have developed, they have attracted capital from elsewhere, preferably equity capital, not debt capital. I mean, debt helps. Leverage for investment purposes is okay if you have an optimal kind of leverage. But attracting FDI requires hard work, requires credibility. Now, yes, so for both Djibouti and Ethiopia, we have to work each one on our side and together to attract foreign capital, FDI, to this region, our region, to come in and develop. And there are synergies. There are a lot of things. Agribusiness is an area I didn't mention, but I mean, Ethiopia is a major producer of fruits and vegetables. So the agribusiness industry, and that was part of what I've had in terms of many sectors as minister, the potential is just massive. Whatever is going on now in terms of numbers is great, but the sky is the limit, and the private sector. So that's one thing I think we need to touch on. So we believe in PPP. Now, as a sovereign wealth fund, we believe we want to be the P of public in that PPP and provide that peace of mind to whomever wants to come and invest in Djibouti and in the region for that sake. A lot of people could consider coming in. I mean, we could be also a hub for Ethiopia by foreign investors coming in. They want to develop the two countries, which is great. It's win-win for everyone. So they find in us really a credible international level vis-a-vis and interlocuteur in French. And then we need to encourage the private sector. All the economies, I mean, the UK, where I've spent 25 years in London in the UK, it's the private sector, it's the SMEs. It's private sector and SMEs, not private sector giant multinationals. It's private sector SMEs, so that you have thousands and thousands, everyone doing their thing, entrepreneurship and startups. Now we have the benefit of demographics. We have a very young population. We need to keep doing more, and we're playing our part in terms of encouraging startups, in terms of doing lots of things that will help entrepreneurs. And I think in both countries now, I think we can do a lot more. But the driver for economic growth has got to be the private sector. That's the way it is elsewhere. The public sector is there to serve, public servants, service to the public, the private sector, and legislate, do the legislation, deregulate, do the regulations that will facilitate business, make it more business friendly, more easier for success. And reduce the probability of failure, because it happens if you're in the private sector. But there's no choice. It's not an option. It's a must to encourage the private sector, and we're doing that. In any project we do, we have to have some private sector partner, local or international. For now, it's mostly international, who are interested in coming in and really investing in Djibouti and in the region. I go back, it's win-win. Investments that come into Djibouti, one way or another, benefit Ethiopia. Djibouti, with inclusive and sustainable prosperity and booming economy, is great for Ethiopia next door. We'd rather have that than a country, that's in really total mess. So thank you for your generosity on time and for the invitation. And next time I'll come back, we talk about sectors and other things maybe.
Thank you.